Blakely Monroe wiped away tears as the windshield wiper struggled against the pounding rain. Her vision blurred, not from the storm outside, but from the devastating heartbreak she'd endured only hours ago. She had spent years dreaming of a quiet life in their small Tennessee town, a life where she'd marry Jason, her high school sweetheart, and live happily ever after. But now, those dreams lay shattered, cruelly betrayed by the man she trusted most. Earlier that day, she'd come home early from her shift at the local cafe, hoping to surprise Jason. Instead, she'd walked into a nightmare, discovering him in the arms of another woman, someone she'd considered a friend. Shock, disbelief, and humiliation had sent Blakely fleeing, grabbing her keys, and driving blindly away from the town she'd called home her entire life. She didn't stop until the neon lights of Nashville surrounded her. Blakely pulled into the parking lot of a luxurious hotel, her modest car utterly out of place among sleek, high-end vehicles. She didn't care, right now, anonymity in a place she'd never dared enter seemed comforting. Gathering her nerve, Blakely stepped inside the hotel lobby, her clothes slightly damp, her eyes puffy from crying, her heart aching with every beat. Inside, the elegance was intimidating. Chandeliers glittered brilliantly, polished marble floors reflected golden lights, and sophisticated guests mingled effortlessly. Blakely hesitated, feeling self-conscious, but something drew her forward toward the hotel's lavish bar. Sliding onto a high stool at the far end of the polished counter, she quickly ordered something strong, something to numb the ache in her chest. After her second cocktail, warmth began replacing the cold emptiness. By the third, her loneliness faded slightly, dulled by alcohol and the distraction of soft music filling the space. It was then, in that hazy moment of quiet escape, that she felt eyes watching her. Turning slowly, Blakely's breath caught. Across the bar, leaning casually against the sleek counter, stood the most striking man she'd ever seen. Tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored black suit, dark hair slightly tousled, and eyes that held a magnetic intensity, he exuded quiet power. His gaze was firmly fixed on her, curiosity glinting in those captivating eyes. Heat rushed to her cheeks, embarrassment mixing with sudden, unexplainable excitement. She glanced away quickly, sipping nervously from her drink. Seconds later, he appeared beside her, his presence sending a thrilling shiver down her spine. "You look like you could use some company," he said, voice deep, smooth, and intriguingly gentle. "Or maybe just someone to listen." She looked up cautiously, heart racing unexpectedly. "Maybe a little of both." He smiled faintly, eyes warming slightly as he took the seat beside her. "Then I'm your guy. I'm Calder, by the way." "Blakely," she replied softly, finding herself drawn inexplicably into the calm strength radiating from him. Calder studied her quietly, sensing the sorrow beneath her shy demeanor. "Blakely," he repeated, as if savoring her name. "What's brought you to this bar, alone and clearly hurting?" Maybe it was the alcohol, or perhaps it was Calder's soothing presence, but Blakely found herself opening up, sharing things she'd normally keep buried deep inside. "I caught my fiancé cheating," she whispered, voice breaking slightly. "Today. With someone I thought was a friend. I just needed to escape." Calder's eyes darkened sympathetically, genuine understanding reflected there. "I'm sorry," he murmured gently. "No one deserves that kind of betrayal." "Guess I'm just naive," she said bitterly, wiping another tear quickly away. "Thinking true love actually existed." Calder watched her thoughtfully. "True love is rare, but it does exist. Sometimes in the places you least expect." His words hung between them, charged and meaningful. Blakely's pulse quickened inexplicably as she stared into those intense eyes, her heart suddenly aching for something she couldn't quite define. Hours slipped away effortlessly as they continued talking, the intimacy growing naturally between them. Calder's sharp wit, intelligence, and understated charm fascinated Blakely. For once, she felt seen, heard, genuinely valued, not as a waitress from nowhere, but as herself, someone interesting and worthy. When the bar finally began to close, Calder leaned slightly closer, his voice soft yet filled with purpose. "Blakely, I'd very much like to continue this conversation somewhere quieter, if you're comfortable." Blakely hesitated only briefly, her rational thoughts overruled by the rush of emotion Calder awakened. Right now, nothing else mattered, not her heartbreak, not tomorrow. Only this moment with a man who seemed genuinely interested in her. She nodded, smiling faintly. "Yes, I'd like that." Minutes later, they stood alone in Calder's expansive penthouse suite overlooking the glittering lights of Nashville. The luxurious space took Blakely's breath away, but her focus quickly returned to the powerful, magnetic man before her. Calder moved closer slowly, his fingers gently brushing her cheek, sending sparks of desire racing through her veins. "If you want to stop at any moment," he whispered huskily, voice filled with tenderness, "just say the word." Blakely reached up impulsively, tracing the line of his jaw softly. "I don't want to stop. Tonight, I don't want to think, I just want to feel something real." He kissed her then, softly at first, then more deeply, passionately, igniting a fire she'd never known. They surrendered to each other, their connection instant, profound, breathtaking. Hours later, wrapped securely in Calder's strong embrace, Blakely drifted into peaceful sleep, her heart strangely hopeful despite the chaos awaiting her at home. But when dawn finally crept over the city skyline, reality crashed painfully back. Waking early, Blakely lay beside Calder, heart racing with anxiety. Panic overwhelmed her, fears and doubts flooding back. She wasn't ready for another heartbreak, especially with someone clearly powerful, clearly out of her league. Quietly, regretfully, she slipped from the bed, quickly dressing. Pausing briefly at the door, she glanced back, heart aching slightly at the sight of Calder's peaceful face in sleep. "I'm sorry," she whispered softly into the silence. Then, forcing herself away, she stepped out into the bright, uncertain morning, convinced she'd never see Calder again. Yet fate had different plans for Blakely Monroe, and the stranger whose child she now unknowingly carried. 6 weeks slipped by in uneven fragments of routine. Blakely moved through the motions of her old life in Willow Creek, waiting tables at Finch's Cafe, forcing bright smiles for the regulars, pretending nothing had changed. Yet everything inside her had shifted the moment she'd left Calder's penthouse. The vivid memory of that night lingered in flashes she couldn't control, the husky cadence of his voice, the soft drag of his fingertips along her spine, the gentle weight of his arm around her waist as she fell asleep. She tried to bury it. Instead, the memory bloomed each dawn, accompanied by a growing nausea she wrote off as stress and irregular meals. When the dizziness followed, sharp, spinning episodes that left her gripping the edge of the counter, her manager sent her home with instructions to rest. Blakely stopped at the pharmacy on the way, grabbed a bottle of ginger ale and, almost as an afterthought, a pregnancy test. She tossed it into her basket with a disbelieving laugh. Her cycle was erratic at the best of times, panic was pointless. That night, thunder rolled over the fields beyond her tiny duplex, rattling loose shutters and vibrating the thin walls. She padded barefoot to the bathroom, test clutched in a trembling hand, and told herself she was only doing this to prove the ridiculous idea wrong. 3 minutes later she stared at 2 bold pink lines. Her knees buckled, and she slid to the floor, back pressed to the cool porcelain of the tub, breath coming in rapid gasps. Millie Hart, friend since kindergarten, equal parts comic relief and relentless pragmatist, arrived 10 minutes after the frantic call. She found Blakely still sitting on the tile, test balanced like fragile glass in her shaking palms. Millie checked the result, blinked twice, and then simply sat with her until the first wave of shock eased enough for words. "It can't be anyone else?" Millie asked softly when Blakely finally explained. "We're talking Nashville Mystery Man here." Blakely nodded. "There hasn't been anyone else for almost a year, long before Jason turned into a cliché." Millie exhaled a long whistle. "Okay, then. Step 1, breathe. Step 2, find the father." The suggestion planted a seed Blakely had tried hard to ignore. She'd left Calder without so much as a phone number. All she had were fragments, a first name, the memory of a penthouse view, and the hotel logo on a gilded key card she'd later found in the pocket of her dress. Millie's eyes lit when she saw it. "That's Westmore," she whispered. "Blake, that's Westmore Resorts. The guy who owns half the skyline from Vegas to Dubai is Calder Westmore." Blakely's stomach somersaulted again, this time from a very different kind of nausea. She'd slept with one of the wealthiest men in the world, and bolted before sunrise. For 3 days she wrestled with denial, but each sunrise brought a new bout of morning sickness and a tightening certainty. Calder had a right to know, whatever the consequences. On the 4th day she packed a small suitcase, hugged a tearful Millie goodbye, and boarded a dawn bus to Nashville, then a flight to New York City. She spent the journey staring out the window, palm pressed protectively to her still flat belly, rehearsing explanations that sounded foolish even in her own head. Westmore Towers loomed in Midtown like a sleek glass citadel. Her thrift store wool coat and sensible shoes felt wildly out of place amid the river of tailored suits streaming through revolving doors. Security guided her to a reception desk carved from Italian marble. She offered the name, Blakely Monroe, and admitted she had no appointment. The receptionist's polite smile faltered when Blakely added she needed to speak with Mr. Westmore about a private, time-sensitive matter. "Mr. Westmore's schedule is booked through March," the woman said, fingers flying across a touchscreen. "If you leave your contact information." A deep male voice cut in behind them. "Ms. Monroe." Blakely pivoted and found herself staring up, far up, into slate-blue eyes she had seen only in dreams since that night. Calder looked sharper in daylight, the edge of power around him more defined than in the low bar lighting, crisp charcoal suit, midnight tie, hair tamed in precise waves. Surprise flickered across his features, quickly masked by a more complex storm of emotions, relief, wariness, something dangerously close to hope. "Come with me," he said, already steering her gently toward a bank of private elevators. The receptionist's mouth hung open. Everyone else in the lobby seemed to vanish. Inside the elevator, silence pressed around them until the doors slid shut. Calder kept a professional distance, but Blakely could feel the heat of him like sunlight. Her pulse hammered wildly. "I looked for you," he said at last, voice low enough that it felt like a confession. "The hotel cameras caught only a glimpse as you left. I had no surname, no town, only that you paid cash for your drink tab. You disappeared." Blakely swallowed hard. "I'm sorry. I panicked." He studied her face. "Why are you here now?" The moment fractured. Blakely's courage faltered, but she drew a steadying breath and forced the words out. I'm pregnant. The baby is yours." Shock cracked through his composure, the elevator seemed to tilt. Yet Calder did not flinch or step back. Instead, he reached out, as if instinctively, fingers brushing her elbow in subtle reassurance. "How far along?" he asked carefully. 6 weeks. She dared a look at his eyes, expecting anger, disbelief, anything but the intense focus she found there. The elevator chimed, doors opening onto the executive floor. He guided her to a corner office banked with windows, the city sprawling beneath like a living map. Inside, a sleek conference table gleamed beneath artful lighting, but Calder led her past it to a private sitting area of soft leather chairs. "Would you like water?" "Tea," he offered. She shook her head, gripping the strap of her purse as though it tethered her to the world. Calder sat opposite, elbows on knees, gaze unblinking. "Blakely, this changes everything, for both of us. First, are you all right? Do you have a doctor? Support?" The unexpected tenderness almost undid her. She nodded. "I have an appointment scheduled back home. My best friend knows." "And Jason?" His mouth tightened around the name she'd mentioned in Nashville. "He's out of the picture. Permanently." Relief flickered behind Calder's eyes. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "I need time to process, but know this, you will not face this alone. I take responsibility for my child, and for you. The authoritative tone prickled Blakely's independence. I'm not here for money. I didn't assume you were. His reply was soft, firm. But the media will pry once they learn. Paparazzi thrive on scandal. A single photo of us could spark rumors that would make your life unbearable. I can protect you if you'll let me. Protect me how? She asked, wary. By bringing you into my life instead of leaving you vulnerable outside it. He hesitated, then added quietly, stay here in New York. At least until we decide the next steps together. The idea felt impossible, yet oddly logical. She pictured returning to Willow Creek, facing small-town gossip, endless questions she couldn't answer. Here, anonymity in the largest city in America might be safer, if she stayed under Calder's shadow. I have a job, she murmured, though the protest sounded weak even to her own ears. I'll speak with Finches myself, he offered, mouth lifting at one corner. We'll find a way. Then, more seriously, this isn't about buying your compliance, Blakely. It's about partnership. You and I will raise our child together, whatever that looks like. Emotion swelled in her throat, fear, gratitude, disbelief. It all feels unreal. Believe me, Calder said, voice dipping, I haven't felt anything this real in years. A soft knock interrupted them. Calder's assistant, a poised woman with silver blonde hair, peered in. Mr. Westmore, the board is assembled. He nodded, then turned back to Blakely. I have to step into a meeting. Stay here, Kiera will bring you anything you need. We'll talk more afterward. Before she could reply, he reached down, covered her hand with his. The warmth of his palm grounded her, and something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement of the fragile life now linking their fates. When he left, Blakely drifted to the window overlooking Central Park, hand resting unconsciously on her abdomen. Snow flurries had begun to dance across the city, swirling like confetti in the December air. Far below, yellow cabs crawled through traffic, oblivious to the seismic shift in her world. She whispered to the tiny heartbeat inside her, we're going to be okay. The words felt both daring and true. Somewhere down the corridor, a board of directors awaited Calder's decisive command. But in that office, for the first time since heartbreak had driven her south to Nashville, Blakely felt something bright unfurl, hope, fragile and fierce, blooming within the hush of falling snow. Kiera returned a few minutes after Calder departed, her heels whispering across the marble floor. She carried a tray with chamomile tea, a plate of delicate shortbread, and a tablet already programmed with prenatal care recommendations from the city's most exclusive obstetricians. Mr. Westmore asked me to make you comfortable, she said, offering a reassuring smile that softened her otherwise intimidating poise. Please let me know if there's anything else you need. Blakely murmured thanks, fingers wrapped around the warm cup as though it were an anchor. She perched on a leather settee and stared out at the December haze, trying to absorb the fact that her world had tilted yet again. An hour later Calder swept back in, pressed suit exchanged for a cashmere overcoat draped casually over one arm, tension around his mouth hinting at the battles he'd just fought in the boardroom. Yet the moment his gaze found her, the edge in his shoulders eased. Ready to go home? He asked. Home. The word slipped out before she could stop it. For tonight, my penthouse is the safest option, he explained gently. I've arranged a private car, no paps will be tipped off. Kiera will follow with your luggage after she picks it up from your hotel. Heat crept up Blakely's cheeks. I don't actually have a hotel. I took the early bus and went straight here. Calder blinked, then gave a short, incredulous laugh. You came to Manhattan with nothing but that suitcase and sheer determination. Admiration flickered in his eyes. We'll collect some essentials on the way. Down in the sub-level garage, a discreet black SUV waited. Calder opened the back door himself, a small gesture that both unnerved and eased her. The ride north was cocooned in silence broken only by the hum of the heater. Outside, snow had begun falling in earnest, frosting the city's steel skeleton with ephemeral lace. When the vehicle finally turned onto a private drive off Central Park West, Blakely's breath caught. The building resembled a modern fortress, frosted glass balconies, recessed lighting that glowed like candles against the snow, uniformed staff lined up at a separate service entrance to greet their employer. Calder led her through a private lobby scented faintly of cedar and citrus. An elevator whisked them to the top floor, opening directly into a vast, two-story penthouse. Warm light spilled over herringbone oak floors, sleek furniture in grays and creams, and walls of glass that framed the park like a living painting. Yet what struck Blakely most was the quiet, a hush so complete it felt sacred after the city's roar. "Let me show you around," Calder offered, voice low as though he sensed her awe. He guided her past an open-concept kitchen gleaming with copper cookware, down a hallway where abstract art punctuated moody charcoal walls, and finally into a serene guest suite. Here, pale blue linens and linen-white drapes softened the modern lines. "This will be yours as long as you want it," he said. "I've arranged for a prenatal nutritionist to visit tomorrow and a doctor's appointment the day after. If you prefer your own physician, we'll fly them in." The sheer scale of his resources left her dizzy. "Calder, you don't have to do all this." "I want to," he replied simply. "And I meant what I said, you won't face this alone." Dinner arrived via a private chef, a comforting tomato bisque, roasted chicken with rosemary, and warm brioche rolls. They ate at a small marble table near the kitchen instead of the cavernous dining room, an intimacy that surprised Blakely. Between bites, Calder asked gentle questions about her childhood, her job at Finch's, the book she'd been reading on the bus. He listened with a focus that made her feel important, not pitted. When plates had been cleared and a crackling fire lit in the living room, he broached the topic she'd been dreading. "I have a public relations team already spinning out statements," he said, hands folded loosely. "If news breaks about the pregnancy before we have a plan, they'll protect your privacy, but only up to a point. One option is something formal." Blakely's pulse jumped. "Marriage, you mean?" His gaze held hers, steady, searching. "In my world, legitimacy matters to shareholders and tabloids alike. But I won't force you. I'm offering security, not chains." She absorbed that silently, heart rattling like windows in a storm. The idea of marrying a man she barely knew, and yet couldn't stop thinking about, was terrifying. But the vision of paparazzi stalking Willow Creek, of her child thrust into headlines as an illegitimate love child, was worse. "Let me think," she whispered. "Take all the time you need." He rose, hesitated, then reached into an inner pocket and produced a slim velvet box. "It isn't a proposal in the traditional sense," he said, setting it on the coffee table unopened. "It's a promise that I'm committed, whatever you decide." Curiosity warred with caution, but she lifted the lid. Inside, nestled against midnight silk, lay a simple band of rose gold set with a single oval moonstone, luminescent, understated, unmistakably beautiful. Tears stung her eyes. Without thinking, she touched the stone. It felt cool, grounding. "Moonstone symbolizes new beginnings," Calder murmured. Blakely swallowed hard. "I can't accept this yet." "Keep it anyway," he said. "Think of it as mine to you, and yours to our child." That night, sleep proved elusive. Blakely lay beneath a cloud-soft duvet, listening to the hush of the penthouse and the faint swish of snow against the windows. Questions churned. Could she truly build a life in this glittering cage? Could she trust Calder's kindness wasn't just duty? Would love ever grow where obligation began? Before dawn, a nightmare jerked her awake: Jason's betrayal, paparazzi flashes, a baby crying somewhere she couldn't reach. Heart hammering, she slipped from bed and tiptoed down the hall. A faint light glowed under a half-open door. She found Calder in a study lined with floor-to-ceiling books, sleeves rolled, collar open, hair rumpled from raking fingers. He stood before a wall of monitors displaying security feeds, stock tickers, international news. He turned at her soft intake of breath. Couldn't sleep either. Bad dream, she admitted. I didn't mean to intrude. You're not intruding. He powered down the screens, the room dimming to a gentle amber from a single desk lamp. Come in. She crossed the plush rug and perched on the edge of a leather armchair. Silence stretched, warm rather than awkward. Finally she blurted the fear clawing at her chest. I don't belong in this world, Calder. I'm a waitress from a town no one's heard of. She gestured helplessly at the dormant monitors. All this. Calder leaned forward, elbows on his knees. When my father died, I was thrust into all this at 21. Everyone assumed I knew how to run an empire because I carried the name Westmore. Truth is, I felt like an imposter every day for years. The confession shocked her silent. He continued, voice low. Money changes circumstances, not hearts. Strength comes from admitting when you're terrified and doing the next right thing anyway. You did that when you got on a bus to find me. He reached out, brushed a stray tear from her cheek with a tenderness that frayed her defenses. Blakely, you belong wherever you choose to stand. The sincerity in his voice melted some inner knot of fear. Yet still she whispered, what if the press digs into my past, my family? They'll spin stories, twist everything. Then we'll face them together. His hand dropped, but the warmth lingered. I can't promise an easy road. But I can promise you won't walk it alone. Emotion surged, relief, gratitude, a spark of something perilously like longing. Before it could overwhelm her, a buzz vibrated on Calder's desk. He glanced at the phone, expression tightening. Apologies, he muttered, stepping away to answer in hushed tones. Blakely drifted to the bookshelves. Titles spanned philosophy, finance, world history, and, unexpectedly, classic American fiction. Her fingertips paused on a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. She smiled, it was the first novel she'd ever loved. When Calder returned, she held it up. You read this? Twice. He offered a small, sheepish grin. My mother used to read passages to me before board meetings so I wouldn't forget empathy. Something inside Blakely clicked, an open door in a long corridor of locked rooms. Perhaps, beneath the armor of billions, Calder Westmore was simply a man still learning to lead with his heart. At dawn they parted with reluctant softness, she to rest at last, he to steal an hour's sleep before a 7 a.m. conference call. Alone again in the guest suite, Blakely curled onto her side and pressed a hand to the gentle rise of her abdomen. She remembered the moonstone ring waiting in its box, the promise without pressure, and Calder's words echoing like a vow. Strength comes from admitting when you're terrified and doing the next right thing anyway. Snowlight filled the room, pale and pure. Blakely closed her eyes, letting hope settle like a fragile ember in her chest. She didn't have all the answers, only the next right step. And for now, that was enough. Blakely woke to muffled voices drifting through her half-open door and the rich aroma of coffee wafting in from the kitchen. Sunlight bounced off snow still piled on the terrace, filling the guest suite with a crystalline glow. For the first time in weeks she felt rested, truly rested, yet the memory of the previous night's vulnerable conversation with Calder made her pulse pick up. She showered quickly, tugged on a soft cashmere cardigan Kiera had left on a chair, complete with the tag still attached, and padded toward the living area. Calder stood at the stove, sleeves rolled, expertly whisking eggs in a copper pan. The image, billionaire CEO in bare feet and immaculate slacks, made her pause in the doorway. He glanced up, caught her staring, and flashed a grin that crinkled the edge of his eyes. Morning. I ordered a chef but changed my mind. Figured I could manage scrambled eggs. Blakely chuckled, easing onto a stool at the Marble Island. I'm surprised you know where your own kitchen is. I wasn't always Westmore Resorts, he reminded her, sliding fluffy eggs onto a plate. College dorms teach a man resourcefulness. They ate companionably, eggs, buttered toast, and plump blueberries Calder insisted were flown in weekly from Oregon because they tasted like real summer. Halfway through breakfast, Kiera arrived with a meticulous itinerary. At 10 o'clock, a private car would take Blakely to Dr. Sato, a renowned obstetrician who specialized in high-risk pregnancies and VIP privacy. Afterward, a stylist would meet her at the penthouse with a selection of winter coats, practical, media-proofed fabrics that photographed modestly but flattered a growing bump. Blakely blinked, overwhelmed. "I can choose my own coat at Macy's." "I know," Calder said gently, "but once photographers start circling, small details matter. They'll dissect the brand of your shoes and the weight of your scarf." He met her gaze with steady resolve. "I refuse to let them reduce you to tabloid fodder." She wanted to object, yet there was comfort in his thoroughness, relief, too, that she didn't have to face this alone. So she nodded, secretly grateful. Dr. Sato's private clinic occupied an entire floor of a discreet Upper East Side townhouse. The waiting lounge resembled a spa retreat, muted earth tones, trickling water walls, herbal tea on tap. Blakely, shivering despite her borrowed coat, filled out paperwork while Calder conferred with Kiera at the reception desk, ensuring everything was billed anonymously. In the exam room, Dr. Sato greeted Blakely with warm professionalism. She spoke in calm, confident tones as she performed an ultrasound that left Blakely breathless. The monitor flickered, revealing a tiny grain of rice heartbeat flashing rhythmically. Tears pricked her eyes, and before she could wipe them away, Calder reached for her hand, squeezing gently. For a long moment they stared in reverent silence at the bright pulse of new life. 7 weeks and 2 days, Dr. Sato confirmed with a smile. "Heartbeat is strong. Everything looks healthy so far." She printed a glossy image and handed it to Blakely. The photo felt like a fragile miracle in her palm, proof that no matter how bewildering the future, one thing was undeniably beautiful. As they left the clinic, a gust of icy wind whipped along Madison Avenue. Calder guided her into the waiting SUV, but a sudden burst of camera flashes popped from behind a parked van. 2 paparazzi lunged forward, shutters rapid-firing. Calder's security detail closed ranks immediately, but not before one photographer shouted, "Calder, who's the mystery brunette? Is the Westmore Air finally on the way?" Blakely shrank into her seat, pulse thrumming. Inside the vehicle, Calder's jaw was granite. "I'm sorry," he muttered, nodding a fist on his knee. "This was supposed to be quiet." She swallowed, fingers brushing the ultrasound tucked safely in her coat pocket. "It was bound to happen eventually." His gaze softened. "We'll manage the fallout. But first, you need to feel safe." Back at the penthouse, Calder convened an emergency call with his longtime public relations strategist, Dylan Sharp, who recommended issuing a controlled statement within 48 hours, something minimal yet honest enough to deflate wild speculation. Dylan cautioned that rival hospitality magnate Cameron Blake, always eager to destabilize Westmore resorts, would exploit any hint of scandal. "We get ahead, or Blake weaponizes this," Dylan warned. Later, while Calder stepped into back-to-back video conferences, the stylist team arrived, plus a tailor who set up rolling racks of winter maternity wear. Blakely endured fittings in a daze as tape measures snaked around her waist, hips, and bust. She finally settled on a supple camel trench that felt like a secure hug. When the penthouse door closed behind the crew, she slumped onto the sofa, exhausted. Evening descended, Manhattan glowing amber and cobalt beyond the glass. Calder emerged at last, loosening his tie, eyes drawn immediately to her curled form. He joined her on the sofa without a word, stretching an arm along the backrest. Silence settled, not awkward but brimming with unspoken thoughts. Blakely traced a pattern on her knee. Seeing the baby's heartbeat, it made everything real. "It was the most humbling 30 seconds of my life," he admitted quietly. She looked up, startled by the crack of vulnerability in his voice. He exhaled, gaze fixed on the twinkling skyline. "I built hotels on 5 continents, negotiated 12-figure deals, but nothing prepared me for that dot of light. A short laugh escaped, tinged with awe. I felt terrified, and indescribably honored. Emotion swelled in Blakely's chest. Instinctively, she laid her hand on his. Calder turned his palm, interlacing their fingers. A warm current pulsed between them, the night hushed and electric. But the serenity fractured when Calder's phone buzzed sharply on the coffee table. He answered, listened, and his face drained of color. "Are you certain?" he asked. A pause. "I'll handle it." He ended the call and looked at Blakely, eyes darkened. "Someone leaked our clinic appointment, date, location, doctor's name. It's on a gossip site already." Her stomach pitched. "Who would do that?" "My short list of enemies is substantial." He pinched the bridge of his nose. "Blake, maybe. Or an inside source who figured there was money to be made." Panic fluttered, but Blakely forced herself to breathe. "What happens now?" "We accelerate the statement. Tonight." He rose, pacing once before facing her again. "I can go alone, stand before the cameras and accept full responsibility. Your name doesn't have to be public yet." She shook her head. "I won't hide. If we start with secrets, we'll drown in them. I'll stand beside you." A flicker of something, respect, admiration, maybe affection, softened his gaze. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "Yes. But on one condition, we tell the truth. No fake engagement, no script about whirlwind love if it isn't real yet." Calder stepped closer, the space between them charged. "I don't need spin doctors when honesty serves better." His voice dropped, raw and earnest. "Blakely, I don't yet know what shape our future takes, but I do know I feel more alive when you're near." Her breath stilled. Tension stretched until he reached out, fingers brushing a stray lock behind her ear. Electricity hummed in the quiet. A discreet knock interrupted, Kiera again, poised with a folder of talking points. The moment cracked, but the new intimacy lingered in the way Calder's hand remained at the small of Blakely's back as they walked to his study. The improvised press conference was streamed from Westmore Tower's media room. Under bright lights, Calder spoke first, voice calm but resolute. He confirmed he was expecting a child with Blakely Monroe, described her as a courageous, compassionate woman who deserves respect and privacy, and warned that any harassment would be pursued legally. No engagement announcement, no romantic embellishment, just facts delivered with quiet conviction. Then he stepped aside, offering Blakely the podium if she wished. Her knees trembled, yet she found her voice. "I didn't grow up around cameras," she began, lips barely steady. "But I believe every child deserves to know they were welcomed with honesty and hope. That's why I'm here, because truth matters more than headlines." She paused, met Calder's proud gaze, and finished, "We ask for privacy and kindness as we navigate this new chapter together." Flashes popped like fireworks, questions flung across the room, but security ushered them out swiftly. In the elevator afterward, adrenaline drained from Blakely's limbs, leaving her shaky. Calder slipped an arm around her shoulders, anchoring her against his side. "You were incredible," he murmured against her hair. She managed a tremulous laugh. "I think I'll faint now." "Not on my watch." He tightened his hold, guiding her back to the SUV. That night, headlines blazed across every screen, "Westmore heir on the way, secret sweetheart speaks out." Most coverage praised Blakely's sincerity, though a few tabloids mocked her small-town origins. Calder's legal team fired off cease and desist letters to the worst offenders, while Dylan Sharp leveraged sympathetic outlets to spin the couple as a modern fairy tale rather than scandal. Around midnight, Calder found Blakely seated at the kitchen island, nursing warm milk and scrolling anxiously through articles. He gently took the phone, set it aside. "Tomorrow you'll meet with Security's media awareness coach. They'll teach you how to ignore the noise." She sighed, mind racing. Is this what life will look like now? Every step analyzed. For a while, yes. He cupped her cheek, thumb stroking lightly. But it's a storm we'll ride out together. And when it passes, what remains will be ours alone. In that soft-lit kitchen, snow still drifting beyond the glass, Blakely realized something profound had shifted. Not just circumstances or plans, but the fragile tendrils of trust winding between her heart and Calder's. They were still near strangers by ordinary measures, but after the day's tests, the heartbeat on the ultrasound, the flashbulbs in their faces, the choice to stand side by side, she sensed the first, impossible bloom of something stronger than convenience. Calder pressed a tender kiss to her forehead. "Sleep," he whispered. "I'll be right here in the morning." Blakely nodded, but before leaving she opened her purse, withdrew the ultrasound photo, and set it on the refrigerator door, anchoring it with a sleek silver magnet. A promise in black and white, tiny heartbeat, enormous future. As she walked back to her room, moonstone glimmered faintly from the coffee table. She paused, slipped the ring onto her finger just for the night, and felt its cool circle steady her pulse. Maybe she didn't have all the answers yet, but tonight she believed Calder's words. Truth mattered more than headlines, and together, they could weather any storm. Blakely awoke to the low murmur of television anchors filtering in from the great room. She padded out in slippers and found Kiera standing before a wall-mounted screen, arms folded, face tight with concern. On-air pundits dissected last night's announcement in breathless loops. A split screen showed Blakely's poised yet admittedly frightened expression beside Calder's stoic profile. Stock tickers crawled beneath the cheerin' billion-dollar baby. What's next for Westmore Resorts? Kiera muted the volume as soon as she noticed Blakely. Morning. I tried to keep it quiet, but every channel is running specials. Social feeds are worse. She handed Blakely a tablet. The PR war began at 6 a.m. Blakely glanced at the screen. Overnight, hashtags had surged, hashtag Westmore Air, hashtag Smalltown Gold Digger, and, more kindly, hashtag Modern Fairy Tale. A pinch of nausea, part pregnancy, part anxiety, twisted her stomach. Calder emerged moments later, impeccably dressed in a navy suit, Bluetooth earpiece flashing. He kissed Blakely's temple, exuded calm, yet his eyes were edged with fatigue from sleep cut down to 2 hours. The board wants an emergency session, he informed them both. Cameron Blake is leaking stories to drive the stock down. Sinclair and a few old guard directors are spooked. Kiera's jaw tensed. Any proof it's Blake? He couched it through shell sites, but our cyber team traced IP hops. He's clever but predictable. Blakely swallowed. What stories? Calder hesitated. One claims you targeted me for money. Another says your ex-fiancé hired an attorney to demand damages for emotional distress. Her pulse hammered. Jason would never. She stopped, remembering the betrayal that had sent her fleeing to Nashville. Maybe he would, if someone dangled a paycheck. Kiera's phone chimed, she scanned the alert and grimaced. It just hit morning buzz. Jason Whitlock gave an exclusive interview. Headline reads, "She cheated on me with Billionaire, now she's cashing in." Blakely's vision blurred. Calder crossed the room, cupping her shoulders. "Look at me," he said, voice firm. "None of this changes the truth." "But the truth doesn't sell," she whispered, throat thick. "Scandal does." Calder's gaze hardened. "Then we counter with something louder." By noon, Blakely sat beneath studio lights in Westmore Towers Media Suite, facing Dylan Sharp and 2 seasoned image strategists. They coached her through likely hit questions: money, ambition, Jason. When her voice quavered, Dylan stopped the drill. "Authenticity is your armor," he said, leaning forward. "You're most powerful when you speak from your core, not a script. Cameron Blake manipulates perception. You disarm him by staying real." Blakely inhaled slowly, nodded. Inside, though, self-doubt gnawed. Could a waitress from Willow Creek hold her own against Manhattan sharks? That evening, Calder's security team ushered them to the Carmichael Foundation Gala, an event they'd already committed to support inner-city literacy programs. Dylan insisted their attendance signaled confidence, Kiera hinted it would pacify jittery donors. The Met mezzanine dazzled with crystal chandeliers and 6-foot magnolia arrangements. But the moment Calder and Blakely stepped onto the crimson carpet outside, camera flashes detonated like artillery. Reporters shouted. "Blakely, do you love Calder or his money?" "Calder, is a shotgun wedding next?" "Jason claims she was engaged during your tryst, care to comment?" Blakely froze, heart thudding. Calder's arm tightened protectively around her waist. He steered her to the photo drop, whispered, "Breathe through your diaphragm, block the noise." They posed, Calder's hand spread over the small of her back, Blakely's palm resting on his lapel. Cameras snapped. Still rattled, she forced a gentle smile. As they turned to enter, a voice sliced above the din. "Tell us, Ms. Monroe, what's your price to walk away?" Blakely's head jerked toward the sound. A tall, silver-haired man in a tuxedo leaned casually against the barricade, Cameron Blake himself. His smile was sharp. Calder's shoulders stiffened. "Ignore him," he murmured. But Blake continued, voice dripping faux sympathy. "I bet Willow Creek could use a new civic center. How about it, $2 million to disappear? Think of the children." Blakely's spine straightened. She stepped toward the rope line, press cluster falling abruptly silent. "I am thinking of a child," she said, voice carrying. "Mine. Money can build buildings, Mr. Blake, but it can't buy integrity. I'll keep both." Applause erupted from onlookers, not thunderous, but startled and genuine. Calder's eyes blazed with pride as he guided her inside. Within the gala's marble hall, donors flocked, curious, supportive, occasionally predatory, but Calder's presence beside Blakely formed an invisible shield. He introduced her to governors, artists, tech titans, always adding, "the bravest person I know." Each repetition settled something in her chest. Yet the night still had teeth. Near dessert, Gerald Sinclair, board elder, conservative to his core, cornered Calder beside an ice sculpture. Blakely excused herself to the restroom, but she paused behind a pillar when Sinclair's hissed words carried. "Your personal entanglement is bleeding shareholder value," he snapped. "Settle the woman quietly or marry her tomorrow. I've lined up attorneys for a bulletproof prenup." Calder's reply was low, deadly calm. "Gerald, I answer to the board on strategy, not my heart. Overstep again and I'll call a vote to retire you." Blakely slipped away before she heard more, both shaken and oddly buoyed. Calder was fighting not only for the company but for her. They left the gala past midnight. Snow fell in lazy spirals, hush blanketing the avenue. Inside the SUV, silence settled until Calder exhaled. "You were magnificent tonight," he said. "I was terrified. You channeled it." He reached across the seat, entwined their fingers. Warmth spread, calming her tremors. "Sinclair wanted me to sell you off like an asset. Never again." Emotion clogged her throat. "Calder, this world, it's devouring." He turned, midnight city lights flickering across his features. "Then we rewrite the rules." Morning headlines sprang from that single ropeline exchange, SmallTOWN fiancé shuts down billionaire rival. Social sentiment tilted unexpectedly. Bloggers praised Blakely's poise, mainstream outlets speculated that Westmore stock slump might rebound on public goodwill. But Cameron Blake struck back fast. By noon, a grainy security video hit the gossip circuit, footage of Blakely slipping out of Nashville's Westmore Plaza at dawn the morning after her night with Calder, titled, "Walk of Shame, How the Affair Began." The narration framed her as an opportunist who seduced the hotelier for a payday. Worse, the leak included time-stamped registry logs, suggesting she'd booked under a fake name, the bartender had punched in "Miss Peach," and paid cash to hide her trail. Blakely watched the clip on Calder's office monitor, nausea flooding again. "It looks awful," she whispered. Calder's jaw flexed. "I'll have our counsel subpoena every staff member on shift." Dylan Sharp burst in breathless. "Damage could spike unless we flip the narrative within 24 hours. We need a human interest angle, something no amount of spin can counterfeit." Calder's gaze dropped to the framed ultrasound on his desk. Slowly he turned it toward Dylan. "Book a primetime interview. Full access. We tell the unvarnished story, start to present." Blakely's pulse scrambled. "Live TV? Calder, I'm not." He faced her, voice quiet. "The truth is our strongest ally. And, we do it together, or not at all." Fear warred with resolve. She remembered Dylan's words, "Authenticity is your armor." She remembered the beat of her baby's heart, bright on the screen, and how she'd promised honesty over hiding. So she inhaled and nodded. Together. That afternoon, while Dylan secured the network slot, Calder met privately with Jason Whitlock in a midtown law office. Blakely stayed behind with Kiera, but the security feed allowed her to witness the confrontation. Jason arrived rumpled, nervous, obviously coached. "You sold a false timeline," Calder said, sliding a binder of evidence across the table, receipts, text logs proving Blakely had ended the engagement weeks before Nashville. "Retract within 12 hours or face defamation charges." Jason wilted. "Blake promised 50 grand. Calder's voice iced. "You'll repay that in damages if you don't correct the record publicly." Within hours, Jason released a video apology. "I lied out of anger and greed. Blakely Monroe ended our relationship before she ever met Mr. Westmore. I'm deeply sorry." Blogs updated. Stock inched upward. But the biggest storm still brewed, the primetime interview set for Friday night, 2 days away. On Thursday at dusk, Blakely stood in the penthouse nursery, formerly a guest library, where artisans had spent the day painting a serene mural of Tennessee wildflowers across one wall. She traced a lupin bloom with her fingertip, mind spinning with talking point flashcards. Calder appeared in the doorway, tie loosened, exhaustion shadowing his eyes. "Can I come in?" She nodded, and he stepped beside her, gazing at the blossoms. "I asked the artist for a Cumberland Plateau palette," he said softly. "Colors of home." Tears pricked Blakely's lashes. "It's beautiful. I want our child to grow up knowing both worlds, mine and yours. Penthouse suites and diner pie, city lights and fireflies." She turned, words trembling out. "This baby already has everything money can offer. The only thing I worry about is love. The real, steady kind." Calder's hands closed around hers. "I can't promise perfection. I'm still learning what love looks like without conditions. But I feel it when I look at you. I felt it seeing that heartbeat." His voice roughened. "Let me spend the rest of my life proving it." Emotion broke through. Blakely rose on tiptoe and kissed him, soft, tentative, but he met her halfway, arms circling, deepening the promise. In that hush of fading daylight and fresh paint, fear loosened its grip. Friday arrived. Studio makeup artists swept powder across Blakely's cheeks. Calder adjusted his charcoal suit beside her. The set lights glared, audience mics crackled, and somewhere backstage Dylan counted down from 10. Blakely glanced once at Calder. He offered his hand. She took it, steady, sure, as the cameras went live. Chapter 5 closed on their joined fingers, broadcast to millions, a fragile alliance stepping into unfiltered truth while the world leaned in, hungry for either blood or miracle. Blakely no longer felt like the girl who ran from betrayal into a Nashville bar. She was a woman about to rewrite the narrative, not just of her own life, but of a titan whose heart, shockingly, beat in tandem with hers. 2 hours before airtime, the network greenroom buzzed with technicians adjusting boom mics and producers checking final footage. Blakely sat beneath ring lights while a stylist fussed with the soft waves of her hair. Across the room Calder paced, reading and rereading hand-scribbled cue cards he'd likely never use. The crew's chatter faded under the roar of her heartbeat, but every time anxiety surged she found Calder's reflection in the mirror, steady, grounding. When the stage manager finally beckoned, they walked hand in hand onto the minimalist set, two armchairs framed by a soft cityscape backdrop, a single coffee table holding water glasses and, at Blakely's request, the baby's ultrasound in a silver frame. The host, veteran journalist Fiona Keane, greeted them with a firm handshake and calm eyes that suggested compassion, not ambush. The red tally light blinked on. Fiona opened with gentle chronology, how they met, the surprise pregnancy, and soon Blakely forgot cameras existed. She spoke of Willow Creek, the cafe, the night she found courage at the bottom of a heartbreak and drove to Nashville. Calder admitted his own loneliness despite empire and gloss, the way Blakely's sincerity had cut through a decade of noise. He publicly apologized to shareholders for any turbulence but reaffirmed his commitment to both the company and the family he was forming. Near the close, Fiona turned to Blakely. "What do you want people to see when they look past the headlines?" Blakely glanced at the ultrasound, then at Calder. "That we're human, flawed, hopeful, terrified, thrilled. Money doesn't insulate anyone from needing love or forgiveness. We're learning all of it in real time, under a microscope, but it's still just two people trying to do right by a child." The honesty hung in studio hush. Fiona thanked them, the tally light died. Off-camera staff burst into applause. Dylan raced forward, eyes shining. "Social sentiment is skyrocketing. You just neutralized 3 weeks of smear in 44 minutes." Relief sluiced through Blakely like warm rain. Calder pulled her close, lips brushing her hair. "You were brilliant." They returned to the penthouse past midnight. Kiera had a live-stream analytic dashboard on the TV, green spikes of approval, favorable editorials populating by the minute. Calder's shoulders dropped for the first time in days. But elsewhere in Manhattan, Cameron Blake watched the same broadcast from a private club, jaw clenched. He poured 2 inches of scotch, downed it in a single swallow, and dialed a burner phone. "She's become his shield," he snarled. "Remove the shield." The next afternoon, Calder's security chief, Marcus Lang, conducted a new sweep of penthouse protocols. Bodyguards shadowed Blakely in rotating pairs, still, she insisted on fresh air. Calder compromised by reserving a rooftop garden 3 blocks away, an oasis atop the Whitcomb Hotel owned, ironically, by Cameron Blake but deemed safe once Lang's team secured it. Snow glittered across raised planters as Blakely and Kiera walked slow laps. Crisp wind tinted Blakely's cheeks, she felt lighter than she had in weeks. When Kiera ducked inside the glass atrium to take a call, Blakely lingered by the parapet, watching taxis crawl like yellow beetles below. A maintenance cart rolled up behind her. She smiled at the uniformed man, assuming he belonged to Lang's detail. In the next second a chemical-bitten cloth clamped over her mouth. The world slid sideways, sound narrowing to a thrum. She tried to scream, but darkness swallowed her. Kiera's shriek drew guards in under 10 seconds, but the rooftop camera feed was already blacked out. The service elevator reached street level empty. Marcus Lang phoned Calder, code Crimson. Ms. Monroe extracted. Calder, in the middle of a board conference call, froze. The memory of Alina's last day, her unanswered texts, the police officer's regretful face, slammed into him like a freight train. He quit the call mid-sentence and sprinted for the private elevator, barking orders into his phone: access city traffic cams, lock every bridge, scramble helicopter. Inside the security command center, technicians tracked a stolen utility van leaving the Whitcomb garage 3 minutes after the abduction. Plates traced to a shell company linked to Blake Holdings. The van disappeared under the Henry Hudson Parkway. An hour later, NYPD found it abandoned near a derelict riverfront warehouse. Calder arrived at the scene before the police tape settled. Lang handed him a Kevlar vest. We have infrared hits inside, 2 heat signatures, 1 female. No patrol units until SWAT clears. SWAT will take an hour, Calder ground out, eyes burning. She doesn't have an hour. Lang knew that tone, he didn't argue. They breached a side door silently. The warehouse stank of rust and river mold. From a far office came muffled voices. Cameron Blake loomed over Blakely, who was bound to a chair, wrists red but eyes blazing defiance. A henchman filmed on a phone. Say the words, Blake demanded. Admit you seduced him for money. Blakely spat blood where he'd backhanded her. I won't lie for you. Footsteps crunched glass. Calder stepped from the shadows like controlled lightning, pistol leveled. Let her go. Blake's smile curdled. Ah, the gallant knight. You're too late, Westmore. I'll broadcast her confession, tank your stock, buy your board for pennies. Calder's finger tightened on the trigger, but before he could speak, Blakely's chair shot backward, she'd hooked a leg around Blake's ankle and yanked. Chaos erupted. Blake's gun flashed, Calder shoved Blakely sideways. A white-hot burn seared his shoulder. Lang's team flooded the room, subduing the henchman. Blake scrambled toward a back exit but found a wall of NYPD tactical vests waiting. When the dust settled, paramedics eased Blakely onto a gurney. Calder, blood darkening his sleeve, tried to brush them off until Blakely clasped his uninjured hand. Please, she whispered. Let them help you. At Mount Sinai Hospital, media barricades pulsed with reporters, but police kept them distant. Calder emerged from surgery with a stitched graze, painful but non-fatal. Blakely, checked for concussion and dehydration, waited in a private suite. When Calder entered, hospital gown at odds with the stubborn set of his jaw, she burst into tears. He eased beside her, wincing. I promised not to lose you. You didn't. She touched the bandage at his shoulder, tears sliding. You came for me. Calder's voice broke. When I heard you were gone, he stopped, swallowed. I remembered Alina. I froze. Then I thought of you, of our child, and realized fear wasn't an option. Blakely pressed her forehead to his. We're here. All 3 of us. She guided his hand to her abdomen. They sat like that for minutes, breathing in sync, the world beyond hospital glass irrelevant. Kiera arrived with news. Cameron Blake was in custody, charged with kidnapping, assault, securities fraud. Stock rebounded upon news of his arrest. The board issued a statement backing Calder's leadership unanimously. The crisis that had threatened to devour them was collapsing under its own malice. That night, in the dim hospital room, Calder shifted painfully but managed a crooked smile. I've faced takeovers, recessions, hostile mergers. Nothing scared me like losing you. Blakely laced their fingers. Fear can't win if we keep choosing each other. He exhaled, eyes shining. Marry me, not for shareholders or damage control. Because life is too damn fragile to wait. Tears welled again, this time of fierce joy. Yes. 1,000 times, yes. Calder laughed, then hissed at the pull in his stitches. Blakely laughed too, wiping her cheeks. First we get you healed, she said. And you, he whispered back. He kissed her gently, careful of bruises on her jaw. Outside, dawn bled gold across the skyline, proof that even after the darkest night, light returned. Blakely watched the sun creep over rooftops, Calder's hand warm in hers, gratitude thrumming in every heartbeat, hers, his, and the tiny one nested safely within. Storms would come again, but they would face them together, stronger for the battle they'd already won. Recovery stitched its own rhythm into the weeks that followed. Winter loosened into early spring, snowmelt darkened the city's gutters while pale crocuses speared through Central Park soil. Calder and Blakely were discharged the same day, he with a final round of antibiotics, she with fading bruises and doctor's orders for uncomplicated calm. Marcus Lang doubled security, but after Cameron Blake's arrest, the paparazzi's frenzy quieted to a distant buzz. The world had pivoted to fresher scandals. Westmore's stock rallied to a historic high, as if investors, too, exhaled relief. Back in the penthouse, Nurse Ruth Chin came every morning to change Calder's shoulder dressing. She found him obstinate about pain meds and obsessively attentive to Blakely, fetching prenatal smoothies, fluffing pillows, Googling prenatal yoga studios at midnight. Blakely, equal parts bemused and touched, teased that he treated her like fragile glass. "You survived a kidnapping," he countered dryly, "and so did our stowaway. I'd bubble wrap you both if it were fashionable." Yet beneath the tender domesticity lay unfinished business, the engagement. Calder refused to set a date until Blakely felt truly safe. Blakely, meanwhile, worried her rolling nausea and expanding waistline would soon outpace every dressmaker's timetable. One March evening she curled against him on the sofa, television muted, city lights spangling beyond the glass. "You know," she murmured, tracing the line of his jaw, "the doctor said second trimester energy kicks in soon. Might be the perfect window, before I'm waddling down the aisle." Calder turned, amusement softening his eyes. "Are you proposing a timeline, Ms. Monroe?" "Merely strategizing, Mr. Westmore. CEOs love timelines." His laughter rumbled, the sound still novel and precious. "Then let's pick a date before the paparazzi do it for us." They settled on May 25, 9 weeks away, just after Central Park's cherry blossoms exploded into blush-pink galaxies. Kiera, drafted as logistics chief, secured a permit for an intimate outdoor ceremony in the conservatory garden's walled oval. Blakely insisted on a guest list capped at 50, friends from Willow Creek, key staff who'd become family, and a handful of board members who'd stood by Calder during the ordeal. "If we invite the whole Fortune 500, she warned, "I'm wearing sneakers." While Ruth supervised daily wound care, Calder began sorting boxes in a long-ignored storage room. One afternoon Blakely wandered in to find him sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by dusty banker's cartons. An open stack of handwritten letters lay across his lap. "These were Alina's," he said quietly, lifting one page, cream stationery, looping script. "I couldn't read them after she died. Felt like betrayal." Blakely lowered herself beside him. "Do you want me here?" He breathed in, out. "Yes." Letter by letter, they unspooled a record of love and ambition, Alina's dreams of expanding literacy programs, her gentle teasing about Calder's ruthless negotiating style, her final note written days before the crash thanking him for teaching her the art of boldness. Tears slipped unchecked down Calder's cheeks. Blakely pressed his hand, aching for the younger man he'd been, guilt-ridden, armor-clad. When the last letter lay folded, Calder exhaled shakily. "I spent years believing happiness was a liability, something my enemies could weaponize. Loving you proves that wrong." Blakely kissed the tear track on his cheek. "Love doesn't weaken steel, Calder. It tempers it." He gathered Alina's letters into a wooden keepsake box, locked it, and placed it on a shelf beside a framed ultrasound. Grief and hope, shelved side by side, felt like balance at last. April bloomed green and gold. They flew to Tennessee on Calder's Gulfstream so Blakely could introduce him to Willow Creek on her own terms. Main Street's red brick storefronts looked toy-small after Manhattan Canyons, still, Calder respected each landmark with solemn interest. At Finch's Cafe, regulars gaped as Blakely breezed behind the counter, tied her old apron, and handed Calder his first slice of coconut cream pie. He pronounced it criminally superior to Michelin stars, earning applause and camera flashes from cell phones. That night they stayed in Millie Hart's farmhouse guest room. Millie's two young nephews demanded piggyback rides from the Hotel King, oblivious to billion-dollar valuations. Calder obliged, muddy boots and all, laughter echoing through the kitchen rafters. Watching him gallop in circles with squealing kids, Blakely's heartbeat expanded with a sudden, incandescent certainty. This was the father her child would know. Before they left, the Willow Creek Gazette published a front-page story headlined "Homegrown Heroine Marries into Manhattan, but Brings Billionaire Back for Pie." The tone was cheeky, proud, and overwhelmingly supportive, evidence that truth had outrun rumor at last. Back in New York, Calder's general counsel drafted a prenup thicker than a Russian novel. Blakely skimmed 2 clauses before her stomach knotted. Money, vast, towering sums, loomed between lines like a third entity in their relationship. She pushed the papers away. Calder read her silence immediately. "Tell me." "I won't marry numbers," she said, voice small but firm. "I'll sign something fair, but not a fortress that assumes betrayal." He picked up the binder, tore through signature tabs, and slid out the final page. "Then we start here." It was a single-sheet agreement attesting that, in event of divorce, each would keep personal pre-marriage assets while any gains post-wedding would be shared for the child's welfare. Simple, equitable, laced with trust. Blakely signed without hesitation. Calder's signature followed, pen strokes sure. They sealed it with a kiss, not legal, but binding in ways ink could never capture. May 24th arrived on the wings of lilac-scented air. Tradition dictated they spend the night apart. Calder took a suite at the Pierre. Blakely, unable to sleep, roamed the penthouse nursery's moonlit mural. Tiny foot flutters answered her palm. She whispered, "We meet your dad tomorrow. He's nervous too, don't tell him I said so." Across the park, Calder sat on a balcony overlooking Fifth Avenue, Marcus Lang standing discreetly inside. Calder scribbled a final letter he'd give Blakely after the ceremony. "You believed in me when my own heart doubted. Tomorrow I promise to believe in us for all the days that follow," he wrote, sealing it with wax. Wedding morning unfurled clear and tender. At sunrise, gardeners swept the conservatory paths, each cherry tree puffed with blush petals that drifted like confetti on the breeze. Kiera supervised florists installing garlands of wisteria across the iron gate, their lavender tendrils nodding in approval. Blakely dressed in a room off the Vanderbilt gate. Her gown, chosen for comfort and grace, was flowing ivory silk that skimmed her growing curve. Millie fastened the moonstone ring, now sized to her ring finger, onto a ribbon woven through the bouquet. "Something blue," she winked. Blakely's eyes stung, she hugged her friend tight. At 11 sharp, the gate opened. A string quartet played La Vie en Rose. Guests rose as Blakely entered on her father's arm. She glimpsed Calder waiting beneath an arbor of wildflowers, charcoal suit, slate eyes shimmering, shoulders squared yet trembling minutely when he saw her. The world narrowed to his smile. Vows were brief but potent. Calder pledged to foster wonder, protect honesty, and laugh with you even when markets crash. Blakely vowed to remind him life was more than spreadsheets and to choose us every sunrise, imperfectly but wholeheartedly. Ring slid home, hers a delicate band of interlaced gold and rose gold, his a simple matte band engraved with the coordinates of Willow Creek and Manhattan. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, petals spiraled down like pink snow. Calder kissed her with careful joy, hands splayed over the child between them. Applause thundered, distant horns in the city beyond harmonizing like fate's brass section. Lunch unfolded in a glass pavilion draped with fairy lights. Blakely's father toasted the couple, voice quivering with pride. Millie followed, roasting Calder's first attempt at diner coffee and earning roaring laughter. Calder surprised everyone by taking the microphone and singing an off-key but earnest verse of "Can't Help Falling in Love," dedicating it to "my wife and the tiny lyricist she's carrying." Later, as guests mingled over peach cobbler and espresso, Kiera pulled Blakely aside with a small wrapped box. Inside lay the moonstone engagement ring, now flanked by 2 star diamonds. An engraving inside read "Ever After, Born of Courage." Tears welled anew. Evening gilded the city as the newlyweds escaped in a vintage cream Rolls-Royce toward the Carlisle Hotel, no paparazzi chase, thanks to Lang's decoys. In their suite, Calder carried Blakely over the threshold, then set her down gingerly. "No armor," he whispered, hands tracing the silk curve of her waist. "Just us." She smiled, pressing her palms to his heart. "And our stowaway." They laughed softly, heads tipping together. Through the open window came faint sounds of a city forever in motion, car horns, distant laughter, but inside the suite, time stopped, held in the pause between heartbeats. Hours later, long after room service plates cooled, Calder produced the letter. Blakely read it curled against his healed shoulder, moonlight striping the sheets. When she finished, she lifted watery eyes. "Bold enough?" he asked. She answered with a kiss that tasted of peach and promise. Outside, the Chrysler Building's spire blinked like a steady pulse, a beacon they could see from both sides of their entwined worlds. The battles behind them had forged more than headlines, they'd forged a partnership tested by fear, tempered by truth, crowned by love. And somewhere beneath Blakely's hand, a tiny foot kicked approval, ready for the next chapter yet to be written. Summer drifted over Manhattan in slow, honey-gold waves, turning the city's steel angles syrup-soft and fragrant with hot dog carts and window boxes of geraniums. Calder and Blakely returned from a 3-day honeymoon at a tiny inn on Martha's Vineyard, short, by Billionaire standards, but perfect. Barefoot dawns on the beach, games of rummy by a salt-blasted porch lamp, long talks about nothing and everything while their unborn daughter rolled lazily beneath Blakely's palm. Back home, they moved into a brownstone on the Upper West Side, discreet but roomy, its stoop shaded by gnarled lindens that reminded Blakely of the maples lining Willow Creek's main square. The penthouse, they decided, would stay as an occasional crash pad. They wanted a door that opened to a neighborhood, not a lobby staffed in tuxedos. Calder delighted in domestic minutiae with the zeal of a man discovering a new planet. He argued with contractors about the precise lullaby setting of the nursery's star projector and spent Saturday mornings hunting flea markets for vintage picture books. On Monday board calls, he no longer stayed in the office past midnight. At 6 sharp he'd pack his briefcase and tell stunned executives, "I've got a bedtime story to rehearse." Stock analysts soon noticed performance hadn't dipped. In fact, Westmore Resorts hit record occupancy after Calder approved a mid-priced, storybook suite concept inspired by Blakely's childhood tales. His personal metamorphosis became a Harvard case study within a year. Blakely, meanwhile, folded herself into the city with equal earnestness. She audited a creative writing class at Columbia, strolled Riverside Park for prenatal yoga meet UPS, and volunteered twice a week at a public library's early literacy project, an homage to Alina's letters and a promise to their child. Paparazzi still lurked, but Lang's team trained her in low-profile exits and the art of the uninteresting wardrobe, bucket hat, gray hoodie, diaper bag chic. When a tabloid tried to spin a billionaire bride's boredom shopping spree using blurry shots of her lugging library totes, the internet laughed it off, dubbing her book bag Blakely, in a wave of surprisingly affectionate memes. By August's first heat wave, the baby's kicks grew insistent, visible ripples beneath cotton dresses. One sultry night, thunder growled over the Hudson. Blakely jolted awake at 3 a.m., sheets damp, a sharp pressure low in her abdomen. Calder sat bolt upright before she could speak, instincts on hair trigger since the kidnapping. "Hospital?" he asked, voice rasping with adrenaline. She nodded, wincing as another contraction built. Lang's escort team materialized in minutes, but Blakely waved them back, bracing against the doorway. "No security circus," she insisted between breaths. "Just us." Calder bundled her into their midnight blue Defender, tires hissing through puddles toward Mount Sinai. The delivery suite felt hushed, intimate, soft lights, a jazz playlist looping quietly. For 14 hours, labor ebbed and roared. Calder coached breaths, wiped sweat, whispered half-remembered verses of lullabies. When dawn brushed the window pale pink, a final push brought a wet cry that carved a brand-new chamber in their hearts. Emery Monroe Westmore arrived weighing 6 pounds, 12 ounces, with a cloud of dark hair and Calder's slate-blue eyes. Blakely sobbed with exhaustion and awe. Calder, finger trembling inside his daughter's fist, simply whispered, "You're the bravest person I've ever met," and no one in the room knew whether he meant Emery or Blakely or both. News of the birth broke almost instantly, but public appetite had mellowed. Headlines were gentle this time. Westmore heir arrives, parents ask for quiet joy. Donations flooded the literacy initiative in Emory's name. Willow Creek's mayor declared August 4th Emory Day, prompting Calder to laugh and foot the bill for a new public playground there. The brownstone settled into a rhythm of night feeds and diaper changes, interrupted by Calder's delight in surprising Blakely with 3 a.m. takeout from every 24-hour deli on the Upper West. Kiera visited weekly, cooing over tiny onesies. Millie arrived for a month-long residency as honorary aunt, teaching Calder how to swaddle without a corporate flowchart. Even Gerald Sinclair, former skeptic, sent a hand-carved rocking chair with a note, "Lesson learned, family is shareholder value." One crisp October afternoon, Blakely strapped Emory into a carrier and met Calder outside Westmore Towers for the company's annual charity walk. Cameras clicked, but she no longer flinched. She stepped onto the stage, baby snug against her chest, and spoke to thousands of employees about stories, the ones that shame us and the ones we choose to write instead. She finished with a simple line, "This is our next chapter. Thank you for letting it be about hope." Calder watched, pride blazing, his empire cheered the quiet waitress who had rewritten its most important narrative. That night, after Emory finally drifted to sleep, they climbed to the brownstone's roof deck. The city glittered, brisk wind fluttering Blakely's cardigan. Calder wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, pulling her close. "Remember the Nashville bar?" he asked, smiling. "I remember thinking you were trouble," she teased. "I was," he agreed, brushing a kiss to her temple. "The best kind." Above them, the sky held a handful of early stars. Below, taxis threaded the avenues like fireflies. Blakely rested her head on Calder's shoulder, fingers laced with his. The years ahead would be noisy, business expansions, school runs, maybe siblings for Emory, but in that rooftop hush, everything important was already in place: the man who traded boardrooms for bedtime, the woman who dared to trust after betrayal, and a tiny girl whose mere heartbeat had toppled empires of fear. Blakely felt that heartbeat now through the baby monitor at her hip, steady as skyline pulses. She closed her eyes, savoring the improbable arc that had brought her here, from heartbreak, to a stranger's penthouse, to this tender, ordinary magic. When she opened them again, Calder was watching her with the same wonder he'd shown the night they met. "Ready to keep writing?" he asked softly. She squeezed his hand. Page by page. Far below, a siren wailed then softened into distance. The city kept on thundering, but on the quiet rooftop, amidst jasmine in terracotta pots and the hum of new love, Chapter 8, their forever chapter, settled gracefully into place.